Hey, this is Ramy Youssef, and this is the team from Number One Happy Family USA, and we're at the Deadline Studio Prime Experience. The inspiration really started with, I had all these stories from this period of time that felt really unexplored. I started to dig into them a little bit, this stuff happened when I was a kid, at least the beginning seeds. Then what we ended up making is not exactly my childhood. But the beginning seeds, I didn't really start digging into it till maybe 10 years later, 15 years later. And I look back and say, oh, this is crazy. And it's so crazy, it should be animated. And growing up, I loved South Park. And then someone was like, hey, do you want to meet Pam Brady from South Park? And I said, yeah, I would really love that. and so that really kicked things off. And then really quickly, Mona became involved because we loved her style, that she'd already kind of, had such a clear voice. And we thought it would work with what we wanted to make.
And I also begged to meet Ramy, which, I'm acting casual here. No, but so it was so exciting to meet him, and that he already had this animated idea. And the fact that it just was so suited for animation, and it also would appeal to us too, is that it was a way to talk about where we are now, without being ham-fisted politically. We're in a tricky situation, is what I'm telling you. And it's a way to go, oh, how do we end up here? How can we comment on where we are without talking about where we are? It's kind of like, or an origin story.
I mean, I was so excited as soon as they came to me with the project. I could see straight away there was so much heart in it. And it was also so grounded, actually, because it was based on so much of real life. And I think that actually makes it more exciting because you have so much more latitude, actually, to get quite wild with some of the animation because the story itself is so grounded. And so we thought a lot about the art style. We discussed different illustrators whose work we liked, different shows that were really interesting reference points for us. We all love Peanuts and Doug, a lot of shows from the era, King of the Hill, Daria. And I don't know, it also felt like our aesthetics were like quite aligned. There were no big conflicts of like, I want to do it exactly like this. But it was really, really helpful actually, especially to have Pam's experience in animation, because I was drawing while we were in the writer's room and Pam was saying things like, you need to make the head bigger, you need to make the eyes bigger. And I really didn't understand how essential that was to be able to convey some of the feelings on their characters' faces, because animation is just a different world to the one that I knew.
I think one of the first things emotionally about the show, because I've been really fortunate to get to make live action shows and then to think, okay, why is this idea animated? And it really first came out of, what if they look different when they're inside the house and when they're outside the house? Initially, we were figuring out what that looked like. And there was a first pitch that was they were just different people, totally different people. And then we said, okay, that's probably a very key way to, confuse an entire audience. So then it became, oh, wow, watch this man out of fear make his beard disappear and turn into a mustache. Watch this, young teenage girl take her curly hair and immediately become straight. And so we were really into this idea of how the doorway to your front yard would be this portal. And so then it became about what's that portal style that makes it look right. And we tried so many different things. And I think we kind of landed on wanting it to look and feel a little bit like dial-up internet. Like that was kind of the thing where, because we had found that actually, I think in some of our text or something, and we found it somewhere. Do you remember how we first found it?
The sound design for it.
The sound maybe helped. Yeah.
It was also trying to learn that exact emotional register of it feeling like a frustrating experience as you're crossing the threshold, but not like physically painful, right? Like there were types of animation that looked like the characters were actually in agony, which also felt like it was too much. Yeah.
And I think we went back to the era too and wanted it to look kind of like a VHS tape.
Yes. Yeah.
And then also, Mona differentiates all the characters. So everyone sort of transitions in and out of the house differently.
Yeah.
Like, Rumi struggles with it the most. And, I would think the Mona character kind of is more
effortless.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool because it at least informs you a little bit about the character.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was that, Moaz Douad, our composer, sent us a bunch of code switch sounds. And I think there was something that kind of sounded dial-up-y.
Yeah.
And then we said, that's the image should be doing that. And that's kind of how we found a lot of stuff on the show. I mean, I think it's being in the writer's room, Pam mentioning eyes, then Mona finding something, and then we're talking to our board director Griff Kimmins, and we're just it was very collaborative in that way, because a lot of it was stuff none of us had ever really done. I mean, other than Pam, yeah. Like Pam and Griff knew what they were doing. The rest of us, even including A24, we were all like, we ever done animated before, so this will be fun.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I think when we talk about what any sort of prejudice could look like, it's often the conversation is about the external coming towards said group. And I think for me, the thing comedically that I've always gravitated towards is, yes, that's happening. And, how, especially how as a kid, experiencing, their own view of themselves because of that. And how does that inform a type of self-fear and a self-doubt and a not knowing, because kids are so malleable. And I think that was my experience when I was a kid. People say something, I go, hey, that's not true. And then you go home and you go, all right, now that I'm alone, is that true? And I think the series was really about finding that space. And I think even from the very first meeting that I had with Mona, she lit up and said, oh, wow, I experienced all this stuff in the UK. And almost every writer, hands down, regardless of where they grew up. We have a couple writers from Canada. We have people from all over the United States. Everyone was like, that was my middle school experience, and they had all these stories. And then that's what the show ended up really becoming, is all these stories of all these brilliant people who worked on the show with us. For me, it's always like the idea of a Muslim family that needs to code switch, and looks different when they're inside the house and outside the house. They're doing that for reasons that are personal and then also, I would say, political and kind of coming at them. But that concept of, I'm going to be a totally different person when I leave my house, that's what everybody does. Everyone has that code switch. Everyone has that threshold that they cross, and then suddenly they do something different to present themselves to the world. And I think that's the entry point that makes the show so, inviting for people who have never even heard any Arabic before in their life. Like it's about that emotional experience of, who you are at home and then who you think you have to be, and all those gaps in the middle. And I think we always tried to make sure there was that universal emotional core in whatever story.
Definitely. I mean, and also for like a 12-year-old boy feeling like an outsider. And we always feel like the more specific something is, specific to the character Rumi's experience, that the more people could tap into it, because it feels real, because we really did put like a lot of time into the characters to make them feel real. So then that gives you, kind of like...
And I think that's what was great too about, Mona also writing on the show, because I do think there would be storylines or things that would develop that would then influence how you kind of were seeing how it was drawn.
Yeah, the style. And again, the era was such a massive part of that. We spent so much time just talking about what things were like back then. And I feel like the time is almost like it's part of the character and part of the world. I don't know. It's a really, really interesting time to revisit that. And I think there's a lot of people who are going to be interested in revisiting that moment in history. Yeah.